Welcome to They Cast from the Coast.
Welcome, everybody, to They Cast from the Coast, the horror-centric podcast with a little action and sci-fi thrown in for taste. My name's Adam Miles. With me, as always, to my virtual left, we have geek, artist, all-around horror aficionado. We have Tim Johnson. Say hi, Tim.
Hey, how's it going, everybody?
Hey, hello, Internet. There we go.
Hello, Internet. Hello.
That's how you always say it, right? Excellent. And moving on down the line, as always, we have with us as well my brother, David Miles, another horror aficionado. Hey, Dave, how you doing?
Hey, I'm doing pretty good, man. Glad to be here. We've got an awesome topic tonight, and can't wait to talk about it. The Exorcist.
Oh, yes.
Juicy.
Oh, see? There it is. That's the word. We're going to use that. That's going to be the word of the day, right?
Yeah, our secret word. Anytime someone says juicy, bells and whistles, and we're all going to cheer. It's going to be great.
That's exactly.
That'd be great.
That's like the word that brings everybody together during this type of podcast, right? It's like, how was the movie, guys?
Juicy.
Juicy,
Yeah!
You guys are all nuts. You guys are all nuts. You're crazy.
Yeah, well, you know what you signed up for, Dave, so deal.
This is true.
Excellent. So, thank you very much. We've had some very positive feedback from people who've been listening to the podcast and just generally enjoying it. So, got a lot of people liking the page, and we got people subscribing. So, share it out, everybody.
Do you know why? Because we're loving doing this.
Because we love doing this. That's right.
That's why. Because people are feeling the vibe. We're being legit, and we're talking about stuff we love. And people love listening to when people talk about stuff they love. You know what I mean? So,
well, that's
what it's all about, man. Having a show that you talk about what you love. And we love horror movies. We love action movies. We love sci-fi movies. There's nothing better than sitting around with a bunch of guys and just shooting the shit about stuff that you love.
That's exactly. And even Richard said that after the last podcast that we had when we had Richard Duggan on, he was just absolutely loving it. And we can't thank him enough for being on the podcast. That was great. And even he said the one thing that he loves the most, and everybody who's been listening to it has been telling him too, it's just they think that we're doing great for horror on the East Coast because we are just a bunch of guys enjoying what we do. And you know what? I'm fairly honored by that. So
yeah, me too.
We'll keep that going. So let's kind of jump into things here for a second. Dave, how's your week been? What have you been up to?
Well, obviously catching up on some more horror movies. I got a chance to watch Don't Breathe, finally, directed by Fede Alvarez, who directed the remake of The Evil Dead a few years back.
Yes.
So that was pretty exciting. Did you guys get a chance to catch it?
Oh, yeah.
I did not yet. So you two. How was it?
Well, I loved it. I thought it was fantastic. I thought it was more of a suspense thriller than an actual, out and out horror movie.
I would agree.
Yeah, but you know what? I thought it was very well done, and I thought it was a great follow up for the director, for Fede Alvarez. For his second major feature. Fantastic performances by the cast. I thought the storyline was well done. The suspense was there. All in all, it was entertaining. And I think, we've had this discussion before. Not everybody's going to like that movie. To me, it was entertaining. It was a great way to spend an hour and a half. Thumbs up for me. It was entertaining. I enjoyed it. So it was a good 90 minutes.
I would agree. I did enjoy it as well. But the thing that I was kind of disappointed with was the fact that I feel like I already saw the movie when I watched the trailer. Do you know what I mean? Like, it was like literally
Yes.
an hour and a half of the trailer. Now, when it got to the last half hour, and I'm not going to spoil, you know, the twist or the, you know, surprise and all that, but like the last half hour made up for the first hour. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
dragged on a little bit. Like, yeah, I kind of saw that in the trailer, but I mean, all in all, I did really enjoy it. Like you said, I was entertained. It was a good way to spend an hour and a half. It didn't disappoint me. Like, it was what I was expecting with the movie. It's just I was expecting a little bit more. I don't know. Maybe I'm just a needy horror guy.
No,
Maybe
true enough. Though, I mean, I think I think what you said is true. I mean, it was an extended version of the trailer. I mean, yes, there was additional stuff. It was a 90-minute movie. It was a 2-minute trailer, but the trailer was done. It was to the point where you knew what the story was. You knew what they were going to get into.
Yep.
You somewhat knew what the outcome was sort of leading up to, where it was going. Not necessarily what the outcome, you know, eventually ended up being, but you really got to feel as you were watching the movie. Yeah, I agree with you. It's like I've watched this before, and it was more or less just stretching the trailer out. It was entertaining. I thought it was shot very well. But you're right. I mean, the last 30 minutes or so were pretty intense. And
when shit got real, yeah,
absolutely.
It was really good at the end. It ended really strong. It's just I felt that, like I said, it was an hour-long version of what I saw 2 minutes worth in a trailer. And, you know, I was hoping for, you know, just a little bit more. I mean, it was a creepy subject. It was very well acted. I love the whole cast. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, it's just, I don't want to shit on it too much because, like I said, I was entertained. It's just, I don't know, maybe I had, you know, really high expectations. It didn't disappoint. It's just, there's that one little nitpick. Like, I just wish that it was a little bit more.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. There's nothing really wrong with it. It's too bad. It should have been just a little bit more.
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe they showed too much in the trailer. Maybe that's what the problem was.
But see, at the same time, I mean, you know, given how basic and simple the story it was,
mm-hmm.
they had to show what they had to show in order to get people to go see it. You know what I mean? So I think they kind of painted themselves into a corner, but I mean, I don't know. I'm just being a horror fanboy, I guess.
That's all good. I guess the big thing that excited me about the movie, and the reason why I can't wait to see it, was Fede Alvarez kind of got a lot of heat for the Evil Dead remake, obviously from some major fanboys, you know, it's never going to be as good as the original, etc., etc., etc. And a lot of people basically saying that without the absolute hardcore blood splatter that was the Evil Dead remake and the absolute nuts factor of it, he couldn't probably put out a movie to save his life. So from the interviews that I was reading, he was basically saying, you know, I'm out to prove that I can make an intense movie without all this violence and gore, you know, like The Evil Dead. More of a thriller.
No, he did. He succeeded.
Oh, good. Well, that's on the list of stuff to watch. That's definitely, you know, for my Halloween time frame here. So,
yeah, no, it's definitely worth watching. I mean, you know, speaking of Fede Alvarez, you guys have probably seen on some of the horror sites that we're actually getting a digital release of the extended version of the Evil Dead remake.
Yeah, I did hear that.
I didn't see it digital, but yeah, I definitely heard.
I got a question for you guys. Do you guys consider that an Evil Dead remake, or do you consider it an Evil Dead sequel?
Aha.
This is a very good discussion.
Good.
Because
good.
The only reason that I say this, okay, I'm going to put it out there right now. I loved the newest Evil Dead. I did. I loved that movie. I thought it was awesome. But the thing that made it that for me was that it wasn't a remake or a reboot. It was another chapter. It had Ash's car in there. Ash showed up in the end. Like, it was a sequel.
Yes, absolutely. I I will agree with that. I don't really consider it a remake. I consider it another part in that universe. I mean, even going back to when we did see the movie and we got the theatrical release going, and it basically showed things like the car, the old Delta, beaten up against the tree and all kinds of stuff that kind of alluded to the possibility of this being past the events of the original. But then when you go back and you find out about the deleted scenes, the stuff that Fede Alvarez filmed but never released for the movie, stuff like this, which is what I'm excited for this extended cut for, you find out about the scene which the original poster was based on, and which the opening to the original trailer was based on, which we never seen in the movie, which was actually part of the ending of the movie where the girl is walking away, but she's walking down an old road.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And you never seen that in the movie, and that always bothered me, why I never seen it. And then it came out after the movie's release that it was because it was filmed, but it was never released. And what happened was, that scene, she's kind of stumbling down the road after coming out from all of that, and then this vehicle pulls up, and you hear this very familiar voice, "Hey, can I give you a ride somewhere?" And the camera looks in, and it's Ash. And then when the camera pans back to her, she looks up, and she's a deadite again, and it goes back to him, and he goes, "Groovy." And then that's how the movie was supposed to originally end.
Yeah.
But that's not what was shot, though. So I don't know if you guys are aware, but I think it was last year. Apparently, the extended version of the movie was the one that was actually released and given to the UK for their, I guess, television broadcast or video on demand, or for their broadcast. And so last year, the extended cut of the movie actually played on UK television. Okay. And a bunch of those scenes were actually released, like sites like Dread Central, Bloody Disgusting. They actually released those scenes onto the internet on those sites. You could actually watch the clips. So it was about 5 minutes of additional scenes. Some of the ones that were extended were when she's cutting off her arm in the kitchen.
Oh yeah,
that was extended. I can't remember all the differences, but I know what scene you're talking about, Adam, at the end where she's walking down the road. But I guess what's included in the extended edition, it had nothing to do with Ash. There is a truck that picks her up, but it's not Ash driving the truck, and she gets in, and it basically just ends there.
And that's interesting.
The thing that I thought was really cool was I think I read it on Reddit or some corner of the internet where they were saying that the beauty of making Evil Dead, the remake, reboot, whatever you want to call it, was the fact that this universe deals with wormholes because of the Necronomicon, right? So who's to say that Mia isn't going to show up in Ash versus the Evil Dead? Like, that's already been rumored that she might be on the TV show.
I've heard that, and you know what? I think words out of my mouth. I mean, I think you nailed it as far as parallel universes, the whole Necronomicon. I think it's very believable, and I think it's a very, very acceptable route for the TV show or any future movie to take, where the events from the Evil Dead took place, and Mia's Evil Dead world exists on some sort of parallel plane of existence where we have elements from Ash's world mixed with hers. We're seeing the Delta, we're seeing, the cabin, and there's some sort of overlap between the two worlds, between the two different parallel universes, and there's been some sort of crossover. There's been some sort of tear in the fabric, and you know what? To me, that would make a logical next movie.
Absolutely.
To have these. I mean, that would just be, to me, that would be amazing. I'm actually a fan of the remake. I saw it in the theater. I didn't mind it. Actually, I loved it.
Yeah.
I thought it was bloody. I thought it was great. I thought it was well acted. A lot of people tend to shit on it because it's obviously coined as a remake. I can't believe some of the comments that I read sometimes online, because I'm thinking, did these guys actually see the movie? Because the movie actually wasn't that bad. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Again, it's entertaining.
Everything that you wanted in a horror movie. It was everything that I wanted to see in a movie. Like, it had some funny parts. It was gory. It had a decent story. It was well acted. Like, it was great. But to take the point that you made earlier, as far as overlapping, dimensions and stuff, you can almost look at that, because if you look at the original Evil Dead and then look at Evil Dead 2, they're essentially the same movie.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
yep.
Absolutely.
So it's almost like, and as far as Sam Raimi has said, like, they both count.
Yes.
Yeah.
100%.
So he went to the cabin twice, killed his girlfriend twice, and fought Deadites twice. Do you know what I mean? Like, so it's like, okay, so the original Evil Dead happened, and then Evil Dead 2 happened in a parallel universe. Do you know what I mean? It just makes the movie 10 times better for me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well, it's what drives these discussions. The what ifs. I mean, as long as you're talking about it, you've done something right.
Yeah, I personally felt I agree 100% with you, Tim. It was almost like,
I'm not surprised. I made the point. I'm just saying.
It's one of those things, right? but yes. For all those people complaining about the quote-unquote Evil Dead remake, Fede Alvarez's version, did they ever really take into account Evil Dead 1 versus Evil Dead 2? You know what I mean? It's almost like you had Evil Dead 1, Evil Dead 2 was the same movie with differences. Then you had
Army
Evil
of Darkness.
Dead. Yeah, Army of Darkness continuing on Evil Dead 2, but then let's look at Evil Dead, the new one, Fede Alvarez, and it's kind of like exactly what they did with Evil Dead 1 and Evil Dead 2. People go to the cabin, Deadites, Book of the Dead, fighting it off, blah, 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 one survivor. Only it was a little different. There was no Ash this time. Why? Well, maybe there's a continuing loophole of some kind, some sort of a wormhole, like you're saying, and Ash is already gone.
Wouldn't it be something if the Evil Dead remake took place during the time frame of when Ash was transported through the wormhole back into, the Army of Darkness timeline? There's so many different scenarios that could play out here. I think they were setting it up to be something bigger. It hasn't been realized yet. I think when the remake, or when the re-envisioning of the Evil Dead came out, I think there was a big setup in place. There had to have been. I mean, why else have Ash, saying groovy at the end of the credits? I mean, I think they were setting it up. We just haven't seen what that realized vision is yet. But I think they're setting it up.
In the show.
You could be right. I mean, they were obviously thinking of the show, many years ago. Probably around the same time that they were filming, the Evil Dead reboot.
Yeah.
And maybe the idea was put then, put in place that, hey, let's set something up here in the movie. We're going to get the TV show going, and maybe the worlds are going to merge.
Yes.
That would be awesome.
Absolutely
that would be amazing.
Yeah, absolutely agreed on that. And yes, and I'm excited for anything else that they want to put down the line to us. I'd love to see a continuation, so to speak, with the story with the characters from the Evil Dead remake, as well as I'm loving every second of Ash versus the Evil Dead. It's everything that I want in a horror TV show, period. Yeah. It's got its humor, it's got its gore, it's got its action, and it's got Bruce Campbell. What else do you want?
Well, like I said before, my only complaint is it's too short.
Yes. That is
my only complaint. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's good. That's good. What else you got on the go this week, Dave? Anything else, buddy?
Not much. Just looking forward to the discussion here on The Exorcist tonight. Other than that, some sad news. They got released, I think it was over the weekend. I don't know if you guys had a chance to see this yet, but the Friday the 13th game has been delayed until 2017 to add a single-player option.
Yeah, I'm annoyed.
Yeah. I'm a little annoyed too, but you know what? I posted on the actual post on Facebook from the Friday 13th game guys, and I said, listen, I said I'm kind of torn about this. I said, on one hand, I really want to play the freaking game, but on the other hand, single player, more to do. Potentially you're adding something better, or you're taking some extra time to let the game gestate and be better. You know what I mean? All I said is it better be good. And they came back and they were like, yes, we promise it's going to be a great experience. This is a game that we are making for the fans, by the fans, and we've got everybody on this 100%.
It was a legitimate reason, and you know what? I backed them up for it because, since the game was first announced, that's probably been the number one requested thing about this game is we need a single-player option. Single player.
Absolutely.
I mean,
absolutely.
Everybody's, game for the multiplayer. I mean, there's, it's been such a huge Kickstarter campaign, and just the huge support from the fan base. It's everybody's anticipating this game in the horror community. But the number one thing was the single player option. So, everybody still, I've pre-ordered it. Adam, I know you pre-ordered it. Tim, did you pre-order it yet?
Of course, guys. Of course.
So the three of us have pre-ordered the game. We're all waiting to play it. I was hoping to, it was going to be out this month. That was my hope.
There's only one problem though.
What's that?
Tim pre-ordered it on the PS4, didn't you, Tim?
Yeah, I'm a P4. Yes, I'm a PlayStation family. I am a PlayStation family.
So can we get a replacement?
The house of PlayStation.
Can we find a replacement for Tim in the next week? No.
Do it.
There's nothing wrong with PlayStation. You know what? I have a PS4.
I'll start my own podcast. They cast from the coast next door.
They cast from the other friggin' coast.
I have a PS4 and I have an Xbox, and I've got PS Plus and I've got Xbox Live. And you know what? I'm a little disappointed with the whole PlayStation Plus. I think you get a better value with Xbox Gold. So I ended up going with the Xbox pre-order, the Xbox One pre-order. So
yeah,
we'll see.
And that's the thing. But the one thing I really do like that they kind of tossed in there to kind of say, sorry guys, but here, take this, is that they're now including all of the console people who pre-ordered in the PC beta.
Oh, so, I did not know that.
Yeah, they posted saying that if you pre-ordered at all, you're going to be allowed to play the PC beta.
Oh, sweet.
And they're looking at giving you an extra 4 keys so you can give them to your friends.
Oh.
So potentially I've got 4 keys. Dave, you've got 4 keys. Tim, you've got 4 keys. And we're going to be on the PC beta, so we'll be able to play it together anyway at the very beginning.
Nice.
Maybe we could give a key away to some lucky listener on our show.
Hey, that's a great idea.
That's perfect. So.
Yeah.
Or what were you thinking?
That would make a good future episode also. Us playing Friday the 13th, the game, multiplayer when it comes out.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
Yeah, so they're coming out with the multiplayer first in early 2017, and then anybody who has pre-ordered the game is automatically going to get for free the downloadable content in the summer of 2017, which will include the single-player component. So we're not losing out on anything. It's just going to be delayed a little bit. And you know what? Hats off to the guys. I think they're being upfront and honest about it. They're not trying to pull anything sneaky. They're giving us something for it. It's not like some sort of, we just didn't have it released in time, or you know what I mean? Like we're not finished it yet. It's no, guys, you know what? We're going to delay it. We're improving it. We're going to throw in another character. So they're throwing in you're going to be able to play as Tommy Jarvis, which is another cool feature.
Yes.
And everyone's getting the free add-on for single player. So you know what? I'm good, man. I'm good.
Yeah, no, I'm good too. And see, the thing is, awesome. It seems to be a trend with video game development recently, is that like they don't put out finished games anymore. Do you know what I mean? Like, back in the day, you used to, go get your Nintendo cartridge and it was all there, self-contained, no updates, no nothing. If the game worked, the game worked. Like it was finished. And I just noticed like recently, well, not even recently, over the last maybe 2 or 2.5 years, I mean, it's every other day a game gets released and then there's bugs.
Yeah.
And it doesn't work. And then you got to wait a week and a half to get it fixed. Like,
I noticed it more towards the end of the PS3 life cycle. The last probably 2 years of the PS3 before the PS4 and the Xbox Ones came out, I noticed it really starting to go downhill. Just games being released that were unfinished, unrefined. I mean, more or less they were betas. It's pretty bad when, I mean, I'll buy a brand new game today, and the minute I put it into my console, it's got to download a 10, 20, 30 gig update for the game. It's a day one update, and I'm like, this is crazy. You know,
well, some of these developers are doing that on purpose to cut down on the pirating. So, like, if you got a pirated game,
mm-hmm.
and it's not recognized, and I'm talking like PC here. I'm not talking a console, but you know, in order to get it to work normally, you have to get that update. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
no, that's exactly. The other thing that I'll add, though, real quick onto that is they're also adding Packanack Lodge.
Oh, nice.
Did you see that?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, part with the Tommy Jarvis playable character, they're also adding Packanack Lodge. So I was like, "Ooh, you know, it's more places to, you know, to kind of, you know, explore stuff from the actual movies." You know what I mean?
These guys have a page on Facebook, yeah?
Oh yeah,
yeah, absolutely.
I don't know why I'm not.
I don't know why you're not either, Tim. Period.
Well, I go to their actual page, not on Facebook. It's not all about Facebook, Adam.
What are you talking about, Tim? Of course it is. So, Tim, what have you been up to this week, buddy?
Same as last week. Again, prepping all my lovely Dead Girl superstars for HalCon. You know, getting some T-shirts designed and some prints. I'm also working on, you know, editing a lot of my YouTube stuff, my Geek Speak and my Red Band reviews and all that lovely stuff. And, you know, when I'm not doing that, me and my kid are watching horror movies.
Excellent. I'll tell you what, let's put this out there too, right? Anybody listening who ends up going to HalCon finds Tim standing at the Dead Girl Superstar booth that he's got at HalCon and gets their picture taken with him, we'll get his autograph for free. What do you think?
What are you talking about, man? Like that's my moneymaker right there. $30 a pop for my
That's a $30 autograph.
I'm kidding.
Well, fine. You might shake their hand or something, you know. So
yeah, take a pic or something. Yeah,
exactly. That's good, man. That's good. No, I can't wait to hear how HalCon goes for you, man. That's going to be good. So,
I'm excited. They got a lot of really cool celebrity guests coming this year, and you know, I've been going for a couple years now, not only as, like, you know, just a regular fan, but I've been doing as a vendor as well. And you know, I get to see a bunch of people that I've become friends with over the last couple of years, you know, other vendors, cosplayers, and all this, and I only get to see them at HalCon because a lot of them don't live in Nova Scotia, right? So, you know, it's just a big, cool weekend thing. I mean, I always have the most fun because last year it fell on Halloween. Right? So the Saturday was Halloween, and it was literally everybody was dressed up. It was fantastic.
Excellent, man. Excellent. Well, this week for me, I didn't really do too much. Caught up a little bit on Ash vs. Evil Dead as well. I did watch an interesting movie, one that's been on my radar for a little while, so I put it on kind of my list of stuff to do. It was on Netflix, actually. Go figure. I love the update to Netflix when it comes to October because they got specifically a section for Halloween. So, you know, and half the time, you know, it's just movies that they just toss in there. Because
did you notice that the update was a little disappointing though this year?
It was. Like
the Halloween favorites, and I'm like, this is the shit that's been on here for months. Like, you just took all the horror movies, and some of them aren't even, like, you know, that good. Don't get me started, Adam.
Now, I'm not trying to get you started, Tim. But I will tell you, so this is a movie that would probably appeal to Dave. I don't know if it would appeal to you, Tim. I haven't got a grasp for every type of horror movie that you like, but you might like it too. Have you guys seen, it was from, I think it was 2015, a movie called Creep?
No. I know what one you're talking about, though.
Yeah, so this one...
haven't seen it.
Yeah, so this one hit the festivals, and it just blew people away. Here was this low-budget movie, that basically just kind of took audiences by surprise as to what it was. So I've been hearing good things about it, and I've got a lot of people saying you really need to see these movies. So Frigate wasn't feeling too good, late last week, put it on, sat up in the chair and watched it. All in all, not a bad movie, but really what it comes down to is that it takes place, there's this guy, he's kind of videotaping himself, so it's one of these found footage, handy cam, GoPros.
Of course it is. Of course it is.
Of course it is. So it's this guy who's basically a photographer and videographer. So he gets contacted to do a new job. And basically this guy says, come out to my house or my cabin, and I'm going to pay you to do a recording job for me. So the guy shows up at this cabin out in the woods, and the guy himself that is paying him to do this recording is, well, for lack of a better term, he's a bit of a creep. He's pretty creepy,
Hey, that's the name of the movie.
Hey, they said it. But so it turns out that the guy basically has terminal brain cancer, and he wants this gentleman that he pays to film him like a day in his life, because he found out that his wife is pregnant and he will not be around for when the baby's born. So he basically wants to kind of spend a day in the life being a father, quote unquote, on camera, so that his unborn child will eventually see what kind of a father he would have been. So it's kind of a little tender at first, and you're kind of going, okay, but then it starts to get, I'm going to use the word again, creepy.
Hey.
Yeah, exactly. The shit that he starts to want him to record, like something that he calls tubby time. So basically, he's sitting there recording the guy naked in the bathtub, and he's pretending to wash his baby and cuddle his baby and ooh booty booty and all this kind of stuff, and it's just kind of a little bit weird. And I'm sitting here watching it going, when the frig is this gonna pick up? Like, what the shit, man? Yeah. But then you kind of come to find out that there's something else going on in this house, and I don't know if I really want to spoil it for you guys. It's a little bit of a slow burn. All in all, like, if I was to give it a good rating, I'd say it's one of those I have nothing better to watch movies. It's probably something that you're gonna want to end up watching at one point, but it's like during like the slow periods when there's nothing else really available. Yeah, so. And all I can say to that is, Mr. Peach Fuzz for the win. You'll understand when you watch it. Yeah, leave it at that. Excellent. Well, gentlemen, I think we're at a good time period that maybe what we'll do is we'll take a quick break, and then we'll jump right into the topic of the night. What do you think?
That sounds fantastic, Adam.
That
sounds good.
Fantastic. Excellent. Perfect. Coming back in a minute.
Dead Girl Superstar, Living Dead Pinups, a unique spin on the traditional pinup with a zombie twist. The official apparel of They Cast from the Coast. T-shirts, tank tops, hoodies, and more. The official store, www.society6.com/misunderstood art company. A must-have to zombify your apocalypse. Make sure to follow us on Facebook. Dead Girl Superstar. From Misunderstood Art Company. Spread the dead.
Somewhere between science and superstition, there is another world. The world of darkness. Nobody expected it.
Let's see what
Nobody believed it. And nothing could stop it.
There are no experts. You probably know as much about possession as most priests. Look, your daughter doesn't say she's a demon. She says she's the devil himself.
I'm telling you that thing upstairs isn't my daughter. Now, I want you to tell me that you know for a fact that there's nothing wrong with my daughter except in her mind. You tell me you know for a fact that an exorcism wouldn't do any good. You tell me that!
The one hope. The only hope. The Exorcist.
All right, guys, discussion of topic for the night. But before we go there, there's something that I forgot to mention. I hold within my hands, for the first time in a while, a beer. Woo! Oh, I love this. So I'm gonna get. It's the cutest thing. I'm gonna give some props out here to a local brewery, Schoolhouse Brewery. They're opening up a new facility in Windsor, and the first Thursday of every month they've been having growler days. Basically, you can go into the new location, you can get growlers or bottles, taste test some stuff. Great stuff. I decided to pick up this one. It was called the Big Red Schoolhouse. It's their Imperial Red, and it is basically their version of an ESB, an extra special bitter. And I got to tell you guys, it is smooth. It is good. My favorite beer by them, though, is one called Scotian Export. And I told them last time, I said I was a little disappointed because I didn't have it. I was looking to get a big old growler of it. It was just fantastic beer. So, yes, that is what I'm drinking. So, topic of the night, The Exorcist. David, start us off.
Nice. Absolutely. We're going to talk about The Exorcist tonight. Again, continuing the line of movies that have some sort of novelization tie-in. The big thing with The Exorcist, of course, was The Exorcist was written originally by William Peter Blatty. Yeah. It was actually based off of a real-life exorcism that he had remembered reading about in the papers. And he was inspired by it, and he wrote the book The Exorcist, which of course ended up becoming the famous movie directed by William Friedkin, The Exorcist, starring Linda Blair and Ellen Burstyn, Max von Sydow, Lee J. Cobb, Jason Miller. Just an outstanding cast, and as far as I'm concerned, an outstanding movie. My top five. You've got Halloween, Halloween 2, you've got Psycho, you've got The Exorcist. I mean, those movies kind of round out, the top of my list. So another reason why I wanted to talk about it tonight. One of my favorites.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. Exorcist. Fantastic. I love this movie. This is one of those, I call this one of my feel-good movies. And it's just weird. It's just weird to say that when it comes.
You're sick.
I am sick. You know this.
I'm kidding.
Demented.
I'm sick.
But there's a certain set of horror movies that if I'm not feeling good or I need a pick me up, I'll put it on and I'll sit there and I'll just enjoy it. I'll get entranced by this movie and just kind of fall into it. And those movies include like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Halloween, Exorcist. Right, The Evil Dead, right, mm-hmm. Stuff like that, right? They are just the timeless classic movies that just never get old for me, never get boring, never get old. I'll watch them. If I see it on late night TV, I stop on that channel and leave it.
Yep,
that's the kind of movie that it is for me, and it's just one of the pinnacles of my traveling career with my previous job. And here's Adam's story time, like we always talk about. One of my first trips to DC, I ended up having to go back into DC. I was actually training just outside of DC, having to go back into DC and spend the night before I flew out. And what I did was I booked myself into it was the Holiday Inn Key Bridge. Now, for anybody who doesn't know, the Key Bridge is one of the main bridges that connects into Georgetown from Virginia. So, from that side of Virginia. So it goes right across into Georgetown itself. And just on the other side of the Key Bridge, you get off the Key Bridge, you hike a left, and there's a little gas station there, mm-hmm. and a big brick wall, and there are the stairs. And so what I did was I booked myself into this hotel, and the very next morning, like 6:30 in the morning, sun was just coming up, I put on my jacket and I walked my butt right across that Key Bridge, and I found myself staring at the stairs. And what did I do? I spent about the next half an hour literally giggling and running up and down the stairs as fast as I could, tiring myself out. And then I get to the top of the stairs, and, infamous time for selfie. I made, and I sent this one to you earlier, Tim. I'll probably post this one on the Facebook page. There's a baby face picture of me, fake falling down the stairs. Oh, you know what I mean? You just couldn't help but be excited to see this.
Yeah.
It just brings so much in. So, yeah. So, great screenplay. Now, I'm going to be the first to admit, it's been a long time since I read the book. Mm-hmm. I had an old hard copy of the book that I got from a local thrift shop, and I think I gave it to you, Dave.
I have it in my hands right here.
Excellent. That was it was a great copy of the book. It was a little beaten up when I got it originally, but it was like an old print of the damn book, so I was happy to find it. And I remember reading it and thinking to myself, you know what, there's quite a few differences here, but in general, the movie I found was almost better. Like, it just, from what I remember that the movie was almost better. Almost like it improved upon what needed to be improved upon, and it took away what didn't need to be there. And that's pretty much the extent of what I remember of the book, I gotta be honest.
That's funny, too, because that doesn't happen very often where the movie is better than the book.
Now, I'll probably be chastised for saying that. There's probably somebody out there that's going to say, man, you're an idiot.
That Adam guy,
frickin' idiot, stuff like that, right? But
yeah. I read the book years ago, and the situation was certainly, I had watched the movie as a kid, and then, we had sourced out the book. And Adam, you had said you had picked up the book. I think you read it first, then gave it to me, and this was many years after we had seen the original movie. And I had, read through the book once. And I thought it was an excellent book. I thought it was outstanding, but it was many years ago, and I wouldn't be able to draw on any differences tonight between the movie and the book, just because I've seen the movie so many times, and that was the first. I'd seen the movie first and then went back and read the book. So, the movie has sort of a soft spot, in my heart, and I think, today, like you, I probably enjoy the movie more than the book just because I saw that first. Yeah. But I'm looking at the copy of the book here, Adam, the one that you originally had and then gave to me. Yep. And believe it or not, it actually looks like it's a first edition. It's copyright 1971 by William Peter Blatty, and I'm not seeing any additional information on reprints.
Nice.
So that's interesting. So I'll hang on to that. It was actually an old library book from the Halifax Regional Library on Spring Garden Road.
Somebody's got some late fees.
It's got a big discard stamp on the front of it, so it was one of their discarded books. It's in kind of rough shape, but it looks like it's an original copy from what I can see, so that's kind of cool.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
I'll hang on to that.
So, let's get into the movie for a moment, guys. Let's get into the story.
Mm-hmm.
So, here we have it. Dave, take us further.
Well, I think everyone, or most people that are listening to this podcast, are probably familiar with the story. Certainly, I would hope so. I mean, in simplistic terms, I mean, the story of The Exorcist is about, at least on the surface, the story is about a young girl who becomes possessed by a demonic spirit, and her mother, tries all sort of conventional therapies, psychiatrists, doctors. Ultimately, nobody really knows what's going on with the daughter, with Regan. And ultimately, the doctors come to the conclusion that maybe it's in her mind, and maybe you should talk to a priest. I mean, if the young girl thinks she's possessed, then maybe going to talk to a priest and performing an exorcism, even though the exorcism may not really do anything, it might it might in the young girl's mind, she would think that the exorcism is doing something, and therefore it would cure her. Only, of course, as we see, play out in the movie, it appears certainly that the young girl is possessed, and through the aid of two priests, they exorcise the demon from her and save her. Now that's on the surface. I mean, that's what everybody sees in the trailers is Linda Blair, portraying a young Regan McNeil. I think she's 14. I think in the movie.
She's about 10, actually. I think.
Is she that young?
Yeah, because the Heretic, or well, maybe about 12. Because I think that I was reading about the Heretic again the other day because I was trying to mentally push myself to see if I could actually watch the damn movie, and I couldn't do it. So we'll talk about that in a minute too.
She was 12.
Yeah, so
it's 12. Yeah,
because she was 16 in the movie The Heretic, and it said it took place roughly 4 years later.
Okay.
So that's why I was thinking about 10 or 12, but 12, obviously.
So on the surface, I mean, it's what you see in the trailers. It's what you read in the descriptions. I mean, a young girl is possessed. But, the key with The Exorcist, and I think this is probably what hits home, or at least what keeps people coming back and watching the movie, is the multiple layers, right? So on the surface, you have this possessed girl. But, below that, you have the belief system, right? I mean, there's so many different levels here. I mean, you have the side story of, Father Marin, and they don't really go into it too much in the movie, but, Father Marin, played by Max von Sydow, is, an aging priest who has performed exorcisms in the past. It's alluded to in the movie. It's talked about a previous exorcism that he performed in Africa. And of course, the church enlists Father Marin to help with the exorcism of young Regan. You've got Father Karras, played by Jason Miller, who is probably my favorite character in the movie, next to Lieutenant Kinderman, played by Lee J. Cobb. Yeah. Those two characters, they have a fantastic dynamic in the movie. So, Father Karras he's a psychiatrist. He's a priest. That's a psychiatrist, and he's having trouble with his faith. So again, you have this whole side story with Father Karras, him losing his faith. There's a whole side story with him dealing with his mother who is sick, who eventually passes away. It's just it's powerful images, powerful emotions that are presented in this movie. And then Lieutenant Kinderman comes along, who's investigating a murder, the murder of Burke Dennings, and the dynamic that forms between Karras and Kinderman. Yep. And it's awesome. Like it's probably one of my favorite. That relationship in the movie is probably one of my favorites. In fact, it influenced me so much. A number of years ago, I wrote a script for a movie. It was a slasher movie called Hands of a Killer, and in it, I had modeled these two characters, the two leads, the detective and one of the other leads, after those two characters in The Exorcist. And I had a similar scene at the end of my script where these two people, like, everything's okay in the world, everything's okay, the story's coming to an end and everything is right, and these two characters are kind of walking off, and I kind of modeled that after those two characters. It's a deep story. There's so many different levels to it, and I think that's what keeps drawing people back, to The Exorcist. It's more than just the possession of a young girl.
So one of the big things about this movie, though, so dig down a little bit here too, right? When you're talking about the layers of this, so it's not like the possession just happens. So one of the things that they allude to was something that's very common with, your lore, your myths, your thought processes, your mother saying don't do that. Or, what does she do? Here we have Regan, and she plays with a Ouija board. You know what I mean? So after she plays with a Ouija board, and she contacts a supposed this person that names itself one of my favorite character names for a fairly unknown character in a movie. So much and so that this was like my first internet, screen name, Captain Howdy. You know what I mean? And this becomes her imaginary
Captain Howdy.
Yeah, Captain Howdy. This becomes her imaginary friend. So little things start to happen. Stuff goes missing in the house. There's mysterious noises. There can constantly be heard obscene language in the house. Well, she starts cursing and swearing and saying stuff that she shouldn't be, and she becomes not herself, obviously, which leads to the party scene, which is absolutely one of my favorite scenes in the whole damn movie, because here you have the character. She is not like, something's going on. She's, it's happening, and the mother still isn't fully on board as to what the hell's going on. But then she's got the party. Reagan appears downstairs. She looks at the astronaut. You're going to die up there. And then she pisses on the floor. You know what I mean? And it was just one of those scenes where I remember watching it and I'm thinking to myself, okay, this should just, like, that right there, that's the turning point right there in the damn movie. The kid pisses on the floor. Like, shit's about to get real now.
Yeah, it was a turning point in the movie, but it wasn't the turning point which drove her, to consult a priest and look into an exorcism. Now, before we jump into that, though, one quick piece of trivia for our listeners, and maybe for you guys, if you're not sure. One of William Peter Blatty's earlier novels was called Twinkle Twinkle Killer Kane, which later became a movie called The Ninth Configuration. You guys familiar with this?
No.
So William Peter Blatty directed a movie after The Exorcist called The Ninth Configuration, which was based off of his novel Twinkle Twinkle Killer Kane. The astronaut in The Exorcist, who's at the party, and Reagan comes downstairs almost like she's in a trance, and she looks at the astronaut who's talking to guests about, his upcoming mission, going into space. And she looks at him and says, "You're going to die up there." That character is actually the character in The Ninth Configuration, the astronaut. So there's a bit of there's a bit of a connection between those two worlds.
That's pretty interesting.
You mentioned this, and I don't fully remember the movie, but I just kind of Googled it real quick. I'm looking at the poster, and I'm looking at this, and I'm seeing, Stacy Keach was also in this movie. Mm-hmm. Yes, I do remember something about this, but I gotta admit, I don't remember the movie. So this is going to have to go on my list of shit to watch, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's been on my list to watch for quite some time, but I've never ever gotten around to it. But it was directed by William Peter Blatty, so I think it deserves a watch.
So
I mentioned.
So apparently it was released in the United States, in North America, as the Ninth Configuration, but it was picked up in European and other markets still under the title of the book, Twinkle 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 Killer Kane. So I'm looking at a poster for it from the UK for Twinkle Twinkle Killer Kane. Let's try to say that 5 times faster. Excellent. No, that's good. That's good.
Well, since we're on the little bit of trivia, I got a little piece that I actually thought was pretty interesting. Is that William Peter? Yeah, trivia. Is that William Peter Blatty was back in like the 1950s, 1960s on this Groucho Marx Bet Your Life game show, and he won like $10,000. And
no way.
Groucho asked him, "What do you plan on doing with the money?" And William responds, "Well, I think I'm going to take some time off and work on a novel." And can you guys guess what novel he worked on as a result?
The Exorcist?
Yes. Adam, you get the gold star, bud. You get the gold star.
I love it.
No, but I just thought it was cool that like here's this guy like, you know, probably doing his normal whatever in his life, gets an opportunity to be on a game show, wins 10 grand, and you know, back in, you know, the 50s, 60s, that's a lot of money. Takes some time off to write a book, and it was The Exorcist. Do you know what I mean? Like I just love those kind of, you know, this was his destiny kind of thing, right?
That's nice. I like that.
Yeah, it is.
That's a great story.
Nice.
I love it.
It's right in the feels.
Oh, it hurts. Excellent. Yeah. So continuing on, Dave, you were going to say something else?
I can't remember. What was I going to say?
Trivia.
Help me out here. I already did my trivia. Ninth configuration.
That's exactly. So it wasn't so what I had mentioned, what I consider to be a major turning point in the movie, wasn't the turning point, obviously. So the turning point in the movie, what would you say, Dave?
Well, the actual turning point, which drove Chris McNeil, Reagan's mother, to consult a priest, is, of course, the infamous scene where they walk in on Reagan and she's masturbating with a cross. Very controversial scene for the time.
Yeah.
Let's just put it out there. That would still be somewhat controversial for a movie today, even though it's already been done. Yeah. And people would be like, "Oh yeah, that was in The Exorcist." Yeah.
It is. You know, I've certainly watched the movie, you know, a number of times over the years, and I recently rewatched it 3 or 4 nights ago in preparation for tonight's podcast, and I'd already seen. I mean, I've watched the movie multiple times, and even the other night, I was cringing during that scene when she's masturbating with the cross. You can't even really call it masturbating. I mean, she's like stabbing herself, you know, in her privates with the cross. I mean, she's covered in blood, and she's just, you know, the vulgar language, and I mean, it's a very uncomfortable scene.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, she received death threats because of that from a bunch of religious people, and basically saying that, you know, that whole scene glorified Satan and sex was a horrible thing to show in this movie, and like Warner Brothers had to like get bodyguards to protect her for like 6 months after the release of the film, like,
yeah, all
for that one scene, like, you know.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those scenes where it's almost too effective. I mean, it's hard to watch. It really is. Even today, like I said, you know, a few nights ago, I sat down and watched it, and I mean, that I knew that scene was coming up, but it'd been a number of years since I watched it, and I mean, when the scene played out, I found myself almost cringing, like, oh my god, I can't believe, you know, like, I can't believe this was 1973, I think it was, when it came out. Like, I could just picture the audience, you know, watching this in a theater on the big screen with this happening, and I'm like, yeah, it's there's no question, you know, why this movie, you know, at the time was so controversial. I mean, for the most part, with the exception of a few scenes like that, it's sort of, you know, it's mediocre today as far as scares and everything else. But I mean, certainly there are a few of those scenes, you know, specifically this one, that, you know, even today, and I can only imagine what it would have been like in 1973 when it came out, that are just, I could only imagine what the audience's reaction was.
Now, I have a question. Is that scene in the book? Because unlike you two, I have not read the novel. All my Exorcist knowledge comes from the movie. Mm-hmm. Is that scene in the novel at all?
It is.
Yeah?
Mm-hmm. It is.
Yeah. I don't remember.
I can't remember if it plays out exactly like that, but...
Yeah, I don't remember to what detail it's actually in the book. I remember that it talks about it, like walking in on her, and the scene is going on, but then it kind of jumps to the vulgarity of what she's yelling, and the fact that she starts basically, you know, verbally attacking people at that point, and then it kind of like goes from there. But I don't remember to what extent, and I think I might be wrong on this, but I think the movie had it a little bit more vulgar of a scene in general. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Just to kind of portray what was going on. So,
Well, like anything, right? I mean, in the book, it's you have to visualize it yourself, whereas in the movie, I mean, we're getting the director's interpretation of the written words. So,
Well, and the only reason that I ask is, from our, a call back to our last episode when we were talking about Psycho and how the Gus Van Sant remake added the Norman Bates masturbating scene. You know what I mean? Like, that's why I was asking, was it just added to, make it controversial, or was this actually adapted from the book?
that's a good point. Yeah, but no, it was in there. I just... Like I said, I can't remember
awesome.
detail, but yeah, absolutely. Excellent. Yeah, so, I mean, from there, shit starts to get real. At that point, she's, we start to see things like the bed violently shaking and all the effects that they start to do. She starts to degrade with her looks. You know what I mean? The makeup starts to starts to become visible. She starts running she's running tests on her daughter, trying to find out medically what's going on with her, diagnostics and everything else. And hey, yeah, okay. What happens next? From there, that's when. Help me out, guys. Jeez, we're on a blank here right now. Because right after that is still like a little bit of a lull. Almost like a. Trying to figure out what's going on.
I mean, after she goes and talks to Father Karras, he tries to explain to her that it's probably all in her mind, all in Reagan's mind, and I mean, really what she needs is a good psychiatrist. I mean, she needs therapy, she needs mental help, like we see with most priests in these types of movies or these types of situations, the church isn't very quick to jump on the Exorcist bandwagon, right? I mean, demonic possessions really aren't as common as what people think, and there's usually a logical explanation for it. So he agrees to see Reagan from the standpoint of a psychiatrist, not necessarily as a priest. Yeah. And during these conversations, and what he thinks is evidence of demonic possession, he comes to the conclusion that she is possessed, and it's determined that she needs an exorcism. But
But at that point, around that time period in the movie, then, and in the book, that's when we get the bringing in of one of the the great characters in the movie, Kinderman, because there's the scene where Chris, the mother, Ellen Bernstein, goes out, and there's the babysitter looking after Regan, and when Ellen, the mother, comes home for the night, finds that the babysitter has basically gone out the window. And it's assumed that it's an accident, given apparently the babysitter had like a history of heavy drinking and stuff, and that brings in the investigation by Lieutenant Kinderman.
Yeah. So ultimately what happened was the mother had gone out for the evening and left her assistant, obviously to look after Reagan, and at that time, Burke, who was the director of the movie that Chris or Ellen Burstyn was filming, the whole reason why she's in DC at that time, he stops by, and I guess the assistant got Burke to look after, or at least stay with Reagan while she ran to the store to get a prescription refilled. And when she got back, or her and Chris got back around the same time, they were unaware that Burke had, I guess, been tossed out of Reagan's window and had fallen down the steps and broke his neck. Oh, yeah. And it was, that's an interesting scene also because there are two versions, of course. There are two versions of The Exorcist out there today. There's certainly the original theatrical version, and then there's the version you've never seen before, which is more or less just an extended director's cut. And at that at that moment, at that scene where Chris is notified of Burke's death, in the extended version, that's where we see Reagan come down the stairs doing the infamous spider walk, which was taken out of the theatrical version.
Nice.
Yeah, the spider walk was amazing, by the way.
You like that?
Oh, I thought that's creepy, man. Like, people don't do that, and she did that down the steps, and like it was, yeah. You don't see that every day. That would scare the hell out of me. Come on.
To me, so the reason why it was removed from the film, so the director, William Friedkin, in his documentaries, in his behind the scenes and commentary, he removed it because he feels it was a double climax. So you receive the news of Burke Denning's death, and then immediately afterwards, as Chris is reacting to the news, she turns around and hears Reagan doing the spider walk, down the steps, which honestly, I think it's a little goofy. I think, to me personally, I think it takes away from the atmosphere and the whole tone of the movie. I think it's goofy looking. So William Friedkin says it's a double climax. That's why we removed it. Yeah. But I don't know. When I watch it, I think it's goofy looking, and I think they removed it just because it didn't feel right or didn't look right.
No, and I agree to that. The only reason that I actually really liked it, like I saw The Exorcist when I was young, like, maybe 10 or 11 for the first time. But when I rewatched it as an adult, I watched the 25th special edition, which had that in it.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Yep. So I didn't know any different that it was in there. It wasn't supposed to be in there. But I mean, now that you say it, yeah, that makes absolute sense. It was a double climax, but I didn't know any different. And like I said, if someone started doing that at me, doing a spider walk, it scared the hell out of me.
No, for sure.
Like, that person is possessed,
Well, that was when that version got released, the actual the version, quote unquote, the version you've never seen, the extended director's cut. I mean, I remember me and Dave going to the theater to see that with our father, because we were just absolutely astounded by the fact that we were going to get to see The Exorcist on the big screen, released again, and we're going to get to see extra shit. Here's this movie that we've loved for so long, and there's more to see. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it was great.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm a sucker for rewatching movies, extended cuts and everything else, and watching all these behind the scenes and, footage that was removed. I mean, go back to the talk at the beginning of the podcast where we talked about the Evil Dead and the new extended cut that's coming out digitally with 5 minutes of extra footage. I mean, sign me up. I'm there. I mean, I'll rewatch it any day of the week. But, there's a reason why, and even Fede Alvarez, when he talked about the Evil Dead remake, he says that theatrical cut is his cut of the movie. The extended cut of the Evil Dead with 5 extra minutes, that was actually his first cut before he had a chance really to trim it and tighten up the storyline and the narrative.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's interesting to see, all those extra pieces of footage, and The Exorcist, notwithstanding, I mean, it's cool to see all that extra stuff. But I'm more of a fan of the theatrical, because that's what the original intent was. I mean, that's what was released. That's what everyone saw. I don't know. I guess I'm just a sucker for the original. I like all the extra footage. I would sooner go back to the original any day.
Yeah, I'll give it that. I like the extra too, but yeah, the extended version is not the version I grew up with, not the version I grew to love. Still cool to see. Still love the extra stuff, but yeah, I agree with that.
And I respect both of your guys' opinions on this, but being that the 25th anniversary special edition was the version that I saw and remember, you know what I mean? Like I said, I saw the theatrical when I was 10 or 11, but I don't remember it. I only remember key scenes. And, when I saw the uncut one or the extended one, that was the version. Now when I think of The Exorcist, that version of the movie is what comes to mind. you know, and I kind of wish that I watched it more as a kid, but whatever. I was too busy watching Star Wars.
That's another
like
one
the rest
that
of
we
us.
have.
All
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, I mean, we might love horror movies, but trust me, Star Wars is.
Don't get me started at
Don't get
Star
me
Wars.
started.
Don't get me started.
We're gonna have to do a special edition of They Cast from the Coast when like Rogue One comes out. We're gonna have to just talk the shit.
Oh my god!
Yeah. And today
Hell
we're not
yeah.
gonna be horror eccentric. Today we're gonna be Star Wars. You know what I mean? So we'll get to that when that happens. Absolutely.
Indeed.
Excellent. So everything happens. We eventually get an old priest and a young priest, and we get the exorcism to happen. And
Exactly. So they call in Father Marin,
yes,
played by Max von Sydow, and and I mean, you know, when he arrives on the scene, you know, the cab pulls up, circles around, drops him off, and we get that iconic image of him standing there by the street lamp, and he's silhouetted looking up at the house. I mean, every time I watch that scene, I get goosebumps. It's iconic. It's amazing.
Yeah.
So he shows up. Father Karras is going to assist in the exorcism. You know, the church thinks it's a good idea to have a psychiatrist handy, but Father Marin, of course, is going to lead the exorcism. You know, from there we go in. They prepare. They go in, and then they start, you know, performing the exorcism on Regan. And you know, like I said, it had been a number of years. I rewatched it, you know, the other night, and there were even some parts of the exorcism itself that weren't necessarily unsettling, but I thought, wow, seeing this in 1973 probably would have been a shock to the audience. I mean, and it's not even what was visually represented on screen. It was what was coming out of Reagan's mouth. And I'm not talking about green pea soup. I'm talking about the vulgarity.
The ever so infamous, "Your mother sucks dicks in hell."
Yeah, and I mean, you know, stick his cock up your ass and everything else. Like, there's just.
I love how Adam chuckled after that.
You know, I hope you have a
moment. It was good.
You have a warning on this podcast, right? Explicit lyrics or explicit
that we do. It does
language
say
or
explicit.
whatever.
Yes, indeed.
Okay, good. But I mean, it's again, I'm watching this the other night, and this exorcism is going on, and I'd forgotten actually that, you know, some of the dialogue that she spoke during the exorcism, and I found myself just cringing. I could only imagine in a movie theater in 1973 watching this with a packed house, just the uncomfortable silence probably in the theater, right, when she's spurting out all these colorful pieces of dialogue.
Well, on top of her saying it's the fact that she's this 12-year-old girl.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
It's not coming out of the mouth of an adult. You know what I mean? Like,
it's shocking.
Yeah, I can only imagine what it would have been like to sit in that theater for the first showing. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, and on top of that, like, they're sitting there doing the exorcism. They're, you know, reading from the pages, and they're doing the old, you know, crucifixion and in the holy water, and she's sitting there mocking everything, not just talking to them that way. She's they use the prosthetic tongue, and she's like, and she's like, you know, licking at them through the air, and she's, you know, trying to talk, you know, trying to confuse them and stop them from what they're doing, type of thing. You know what I mean? Like, it's. Yeah, it is. I remember sitting there in the theater watching it, you know, again, going, "Wow!" Like, holy shit.
And Marin, Father Marin warns Father Karras that, you know, the demon is going to try and trick him. Don't listen to him. But, you know, obviously Father Karras is you know, having issues with faith. He's not in the right frame of mind. I mean, he had just lost his mother. And certainly, you know, the demon, you know, plays on that. It knows, and it starts messing with his head. And, you know, he sees his mother sitting there, not, you know, the 12-year-old Reagan. You know, the demon starts talking, you know, in his mother's voice. and he starts losing it. I mean, he starts losing his focus, and at that point, Marin is worried that Father Karras is going to falter or screw up somehow, probably, and Marin basically tells him, get out.
Yeah.
Leave now, because you may jeopardize this whole situation if you can't be strong enough, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, and it's I think it's a very powerful scene when that's happening, and you can see Father Karras cracking. I mean, it's the stress, everything is, it's just getting to him, right? It's too much weight, and he can't deal with it.
But
and
then,
by this time, go ahead.
No, go ahead yourself.
I was going to say that Father Marin, at this point, they take a break, and Father Marin, of course, we see again that he's not as strong as we're led to believe either. I mean, I think he's a strong character, but he has some health issues. I mean, he's got a weak heart, and we had seen sort of hints of that at the beginning in the scenes in Iraq, and eventually it takes him. He succumbs to that, we're left with.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to talk about too. I was going to say the exact same thing. Even though Marin believes that Karras is going to crack, he's going to jeopardize the situation, and you're not strong enough for this type of thing. When it comes down to it, and they're taking the break, you see that Marin himself is frail. He's I don't know, like we already know that he's got health issues, just like you said, but it's almost like this is taking a further toll on him.
Mm-hmm.
And then it kicks off.
Yeah, he's I think he's strong character wise, but I think physically he's just weakened to the point that he probably should have never been in that room. And of course, he has what we assume is a heart attack, and we're left with Father Karras to deal with this demon. And certainly one of the more emotional scenes in the movie. Karras is upset. He's bashing on Marin's chest. I don't know what he's trying to do. If he's trying to perform some sort of CPR or get the heart going again. It's like this crazy. He's just like whacking him on the chest, like punching him, and he's just you've got Regan there that's laughing, giggling, and he gets pissed off, and I mean his emotions overcome, and he grabs Regan and tosses her on the floor, and ultimately, he screams at her and says, take me. So he's telling the demon, leave her alone, take me instead. And I think a lot of people may interpret that as Karras giving up, but I think that's the moment where Karras is the strongest.
Yes.
Because he's finally standing up and he's doing something about it, right? I mean, people may look at it as weakness, but he's telling the demon, leave her alone, take me instead. He's sacrificing himself. So ultimately, the demon jumps out of Regan's body. It possesses Karras, and once he has the demon under control, the demon is inside of him. He, in a moment of clarity, he launches himself out the window, down the flight of steps, that infamous scene we see him tumbling down the steps, and ends up at the bottom of the steps at the bottom of M Street.
Now,
where a crowd is gathering.
Exactly. Now, I agree with that. The whole thought of everybody thinks at this point this is Karras' breaking point. He's lost it. He's weak. But if you look at it, we think that Pazuzu at this point. My imagination on this is that at that point where he already appears that way, it's almost like you can picture that Pazuzu, the demon himself, has pictured the exact same thing. He's offering himself up. Here's another weak, pathetic thing that I will take advantage of. You know what I mean? So it's not even a question of jumping to the Father. It's go. And then you see kind of like when he's, the shot where he kind of looks and he's got the eyes and he's shaking. And you can see that he's trying to stop himself from doing something that he shouldn't do. because I can't harm the girl because now Regan's aware of what's going on and she's screaming her head off, and he just kind of goes and lets out that wicked yell, and boom, out the window he goes and down the stairs, and one of the cringe-worthy scenes in the damn movie when he's going down those stairs, man. Ooh.
And then, of course, his best friend, Father Dyer, is at the bottom of the steps. And I mean, you don't get to see Father Karras's face. He's kind of
obscure,
twisted up, obscured. His face is kind of buried in his arm, but you certainly see there's blood around, and his hand is covered in blood. And his best friend, Father Dyer, is there, and he grabs him by the hand and is talking to him, and asks him if he wants to confess, and gives him his last rites. And it's a very powerful scene. It's very emotional. It's very, I don't know. To me, the entire movie's well done, but I think that ending it speaks volumes. Like it's a fantastic ending to the movie.
Yeah, I absolutely agree.
Yes, and then that's not even really the full ending of the movie, isn't the full ending of the movie? It shows Regan a few days later or something like this.
Yep, it jumps ahead somewhere in the timeline. I don't think it actually gives us. I don't think it presents so many days or so many weeks later. But it looks like she's starting to heal from her wounds and everything, and the family is packed up and they're getting ready to leave, and Father Dyer shows up and kind of wishes them the best, and Regan gives him a kiss, and we're just, I guess we're led to believe that everything's okay at that point. She's okay. Everything's all right. Everything's going to be okay.
Great, fantastic. I love that movie. That's just amazing. So, anything else to add to the first movie?
Not really. Just one other thing about the ending, I guess, real quick. If I remember correctly, again, it's been a number of years since I've compared the two versions, the version you've never seen versus the original theatrical. But if I remember correctly, I can't remember if it was just an extra cut scene or if they included it in the version you've never seen. But at the end, I believe there was an additional scene where Lieutenant Kinderman showed up after Regan and her mother had left the house.
Yes.
And of course, the theatrical Father Dyer's there and kind of, is watching them drive away, and it ends. But I believe in the version you've never seen, if I remember correctly, Kinderman shows up as well and talks briefly to Father Dyer and says, this is the start, or this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship, and they kind of walk off together. Asks him if he likes movies, old movies, and he's got tickets to go see a show, and they kind of walk off together, and then it fades to black.
Yes,
that was actually technically that was the original ending. That was what was intended, and it was restored for that uncut edition.
Yes,
right. And I prefer that ending better than the theatrical ending.
Oh, it's great ending. Yes, absolutely. Because you know what, and we'll talk about this in a second. That plays into Kinderman as a character, just what he's offering and what he's talking to, Dyer about in general. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? It really from that 10 seconds, it expands his character ridiculously. It's crazy.
Well, I mean, the fact that he's, it's a quote from Casablanca. Mm-hmm. I think this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship. You know what I mean? Like, it's just kind of, no, you're absolutely right. Like, it added so much to his character with just one or two quotes, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
so
absolutely. And it plays directly into Tim, you haven't seen any of the additional Exorcist movies, like The Exorcist 3? You haven't seen that one?
No, my Exorcist knowledge is self-contained to the movie. I haven't seen any of the sequels. I haven't seen, unfortunately, the show.
So I'm going to strongly recommend.
I based what you guys have been saying, even with the show, I'm interested in checking it out.
Mm-hmm. So that all being said, we unfortunately, we'll talk a little bit about sequels here now. We won't spend as much time talking about sequels, but we'll kind of jump into them a bit here. Unfortunately, The Exorcist was followed, by one of the potentially worst sequels I've ever witnessed. And when I say witnessed, I didn't say I've ever watched, because I got to admit, I don't think I've ever actually finished this movie. Exorcist II, The Heretic. What the hell, man? I'm sorry. I'm just going to say it. This movie, it was a failure when it was released. People blasted it. It was... man.
So what you're saying is I shouldn't watch it?
I'm going to say
I think you should. I think you should give it a shot, and I'd love to hear what you have to say about it. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
If you can't make it through it, it's no big deal. I've tried several times. I mean,
so how deep did you get into the movie before you're like, I'm not watching this anymore?
Different.
I think I've only ever made it maybe halfway through.
Really?
Yeah. It's honestly, it's boring. There's not a whole lot going on in that movie. It was, I think it was they tried to follow up certainly with the success of The Exorcist with a quick sequel to, it was a cash grab, to cash in on the name The Exorcist. I mean, it had Linda Blair in it. It had some big name stars, but the storyline just...
Does it add anything to the original? Like, does it add anything to the canon that is The Exorcist? You know what I mean? Like,
no.
Could I get away with skipping it?
You could get away with skipping it, and the reason is, so, we're going to skip part 2 altogether, because what I'd like to talk about is The Exorcist 3, because The Exorcist 3 was originally a book called Legion, written by William Peter Blatty as a direct sequel to the original The Exorcist.
Yes, but before we get there, Dave, let's at least kind of finish this for a second here. So just to give you the generalization of this, what basically happens, I'm going to say 1,000-foot view here for a second, a high-level overview. Exorcist II, The Heretic takes place, a few, like 4 or 5 years later after The Exorcist itself. Chris and Regan are living in New York now, and basically the movie comes... I'm just going to put a very stupid version of this out there for you, but basically they find that she's not fully better or something like this, and they with further research they find that Pazuzu is something that's very much so attracted to people who are very sensitive. So they kind of assume that she's a very sensitive person, kind of like psychic type of thing. And there's still some sort of a bond with Pazuzu going on. So she's still kind of, quote unquote, somewhat possessed. But the big thing with The Exorcist II was that it played the story of Regan a little bit further. But on top of that, the story which is mentioned regarding Father Merrin and all them in the original Exorcist about the boy in Africa, Kokomo or Kokumo or whatever his name was, who was exorcised, it kind of plays that out in flashbacks. So you kind of see that happen as kind of like a side story in the movie itself. Now, that plays to something else that I'm going to mention, because I don't know how much we want to talk about that. That plays out to the fact that became obviously the plot line for the absolute worst. Even I don't know, I actually made it through these two, so I can't even say that they're the worst, but that made it through to the infamous finales in the movie series, Dominion, the prequel, and Exorcist, the beginning, which were basically the same damn movie refilmed in different ways. But that became the central plot line. So it's almost like, and I've said this before and I'll say it again, it's almost like any time that The Exorcist decided to spend its time basing itself on the storyline, which prompted The Exorcist, the boy in Africa, the movie decided to, or the movie basically sucked. is what it was. So anytime, when you're looking at these movies, anytime that they actually went to Africa and spent any bit of time in Africa on these movies and Pazuzu and the original exorcism that occurred, they was just absolute terrible flicks. And they were very unoriginal for the most part. So I don't know if we want to talk about Dominion in the beginning, but I just wanted to kind of point this out here that if you can make it through the Heretic, there's probably some sort of a Girl Scout badge for that. But it's.
I'll be expecting it, man. I'll be expecting it because I'm going to watch it.
You're going to watch it. And you're going to come back and you're going to be asking us what the.
I'm going to be like, "Where's my gold star, Adam?"
And you're going to get a gold star, my friend. You're going to get a gold star. But yes, Dave.
And a rainbow and a hug.
Hold him to that.
And a hug. Dave. The Exorcist 3. You may continue because this is, like you said, based on Legion, a direct sequel to the original Exorcist by William Peter Blatty, and one of my all-time personal favorite horror movies.
I love this movie.
Oh, it's amazing.
The Exorcist 3, amazing. I mean, the performance by George C. Scott, legendary. Brad Dourif as the Gemini Killer, amazing performance. Jason Miller reprising his role as Father Karras.
Yes.
It doesn't get any better than that. I mean, it is a direct sequel to The Exorcist, written by William Peter Blatty. Of course, when he wrote it, it wasn't called Exorcist 2 or Exorcist 3. It was originally called Legion.
Yep.
Legion because supposedly there was more than one demon possessing Reagan. It was Legion for we are many is the quote, and that's where the name of the book comes from. And so the details, I mean, Tim, I don't know if you want me to spoil this for you or what, but
go ahead.
It takes place, I think, more than a decade after the events of The Exorcist. I can't remember the exact number of years, but it's more than a decade. And essentially what happens is at the same time that the events of The Exorcist were going on, there were a string of murders going on in, I don't know if it was actually happening in Georgetown or if it was in Richmond, Virginia, but there was a serial killer on the loose by the name of the Gemini Killer. And the Gemini Killer was being executed the night that Reagan was being exorcised. And how it's presented in the movie The Exorcist 3 is that as Father Karras was dying, the devil had taken the Gemini Killer and put him into the body of the priest, kind of like not a punishment, but
like a rebirth.
Yeah, like a rebirth, or basically, wouldn't it be cool to take the soul of a serial killer and put it in the body of a priest, basically laughing in the face of God?
Yes.
And certainly Father Karras' body was broken and twisted, and ultimately, what we find out is the Gemini Killer, the soul of the Gemini Killer, is inhabiting the body of Father Karras. Father Karras was found sometime later, roaming the streets, had no recollection. Basically, his brain was jelly after the fall, and it had taken this long to, start coming around and for the brain essentially to start, I guess, rebuilding itself. I'm probably not describing it as well as I should, but the story of The Exorcist 3 is it revolves around Lieutenant Kinderman, the character from the first movie. Lee J. Cobb died after the filming of The Exorcist, so Lieutenant Kinderman in this one is played by George C. Scott. So it's about the relationship between Lieutenant Kinderman and Father Dyer, and Lieutenant Kinderman had been one of the individuals that had investigated the Gemini killings back when they first occurred. Anyway, what I'm getting at is there's a new string of murders that are following, that have the same MO as the Gemini from years earlier, but the Gemini had been put to death. And what we find out is that the Gemini Killer is very much still alive, at least in the mind of, or in the body of, this priest, Father Karras. Don't know if I did a good job explaining that, Adam. If you want to help me out here, it's another deep movie. I mean, it exists on several levels. I mean, relationships. I mean, it brings the characters from the first Exorcist into new situations. It introduces new characters. It's a crazy story. It's got crazy visuals. It's an amazing movie.
Yeah, no, you hit all the main aspects of it. The thing that I like about this, and it was Richmond for sure, that the Gemini Killer, because I remember the first time I ever went to Richmond, Virginia, and I went, holy shit, I'm in the town of the Gemini Killer. This is great. You know what I mean? But yes, so to kind of elaborate a little bit on that, yes, it's basically it starts off kind of evolving the relationship between Kinderman and Dyer. So, you find out a little bit more. Obviously, it expands on the fact that Kinderman is a huge fan for old movies and classic stuff. And basically, he finds that his friend Dyer is hospitalized shortly, near the very beginning of the movie. And within a day, is found murdered in the hospital. And there's some writing on the wall, and I think it said, "It's a wonderful life," kind of like a classic throwback. Yeah, but it was like with 2 L's, right? A wonderful life.
Again, telltale signs of the Gemini Killer, stuff that wasn't leaked to the newspapers or leaked to the public when they first occurred, that only certain individuals with knowledge, intimate knowledge of the killings would know. And now they're seeing, this MO, from this dead serial killer that it's, nobody can explain what's going on.
Yeah. So as it turns out, one of the MOs of the Gemini Killer was that when he would write any notes or leave anything behind, all of his words would have an extra L where there shouldn't have been. So, if he wrote the word careful, it would be careful with 2 L's. Stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So he kind of goes, oh my God, what's going on here? And he decides, well, there's a little bit of a lead up. We don't want to give a lot away, but he ends up visiting a psychiatric ward, and he's basically being told about the history of this man that's in a particular cell that was found wandering aimlessly around with amnesia. And when he finds him, when they bring him to him, they say, okay, it's taken like 15 years, but this guy has suddenly started from a catatonic state. He started to become like violent and mocking people, and he's begun talking, which he's never really done before. And he claims that he is the Gemini Killer. So then Kinderman basically walks in and sees Father Karras. And he's in the straitjacket, and he's in this cell, and it goes from there. I really don't want to give too much more about this movie away, because in all honesty, there are a lot of people who say, yes, I saw The Exorcist. There are probably about a quarter of that who have ever admitted to me that they've seen The Exorcist 3, mainly because sequelitis. A lot of people just automatically assume that the sequel sucks. And the movie itself has a lot of twists and turns. Like you said, Dave, it's got some great visuals. I love the scenes where it's kind of like an imagination of heaven and hell, with the angels and everything that's going on. I'm not a religious person by any means, far from it, but the absolute visuals in this movie are freaking awesome, especially for the time frame when the movie came out. It was, 89, 90, something around that time?
And, I think it was around 1990 it came out.
Yeah, and it's just all absolute practical when you're looking at it, and it's just beautiful. Yes, and...
the cinematography is awesome.
Oh, it's great. It's great.
That opening shot of Georgetown, and you see the rowing across the Potomac, and you see the helicopters coming in, and it's just the cinematography in the movie is fantastic. I loved it. It's very visual.
Yes. Very much so. Absolutely, like I was kind of saying before, if it wasn't for the fact that The Exorcist itself originally was such a great movie that had such a massive impact on a lot of people as horror fans, especially myself, this movie, in my opinion, would supersede that in just amazing. Being just being amazing. It's a great movie. Exorcist 1 holds the flame above it just because it is the classic. But I found that part 3 was all around a better movie. You could get into it more. There was more to get excited about. There was, like you said, the visuals and everything else. It was just, in general, a greater movie.
All right, guys, I'm sold. I'm sold.
Oh, yeah, dude, yes.
Yeah, seriously. I mean, if you're a fan of The Exorcist, you absolutely have to do yourself a favor and watch The Exorcist 3. I mean, it is a legit direct follow-up to the original Exorcist. It's canon. It's
How come they didn't make that originally second? Was the book not written when they went and made Exorcist 2?
No,
I'm not sure when the book came out.
The book itself, but correct me if I'm wrong, Dave, the book itself was never originally, like you were saying, titled Exorcist 3. It was just titled Legion, and it played with the idea of Kinderman. But
when did Exorcist 2, the movie, come out? The Exorcist 2, the movie, came out in 1977. Let me see if I can look up when the Exorcist Legion book
3. Yes.
Please.
What do you got?
Let me see here. So the book, from what I can find, the book came out in 1983.
Okay.
So the book didn't come out until 6 years after they made the movie, The Exorcist 2.
Yeah. So that makes a little bit of sense then.
Yeah, it does.
Okay. So, Exorcist 3, massive thumbs up. Can't get enough of it. Anybody who hasn't seen it yet, you are doing yourself a disservice. You have to see this friggin' movie.
Okay, Adam, I'm going to watch it.
Oh my God, Adam. Shut up, Adam.
I mean, great timing, because next week, October 25th, is the street date of Scream Factory's Exorcist 3 Special Edition Blu-ray, and with the Special Edition Blu-ray, they've actually got, or they've cobbled together a director's cut of The Exorcist 3. So when Blatty first shot this movie, there was a lot of stuff. There was a lot of additional material that he shot for this movie that like happens so often, ends up on the cutting room floor. Unfortunately, by the sounds of it, a lot of it was cut by the studio. It wasn't necessarily cut by him.
Yeah.
So, and even a lot of the scenes were completely reshot. And apparently Jason Miller, Father Karras, he wasn't even added to the movie until afterwards. All those scenes that were supposed to be, dual Father Karras and the Gemini Killer were all used strictly with Brad Dourif. And they had actually brought Jason Miller in afterwards to reshoot some of those scenes so they could kind of, go back and forth between, you see Brad Dourif sitting there, and then all of a sudden it switches over to Father Karras, Jason Miller. So there were a lot of changes. There were a lot of, I'm not going to say problems, but there were a lot of things going on, I guess, behind the scenes. And that's there's a lot of documentary material. There's a lot of behind the scenes stuff on this new release that supposedly talks about that. Blumhouse has a great article on their website, Blumhouse.com, which talks about some of the stuff that you can find in the special edition. So anyway, what I'm getting at this is they've got a cut of the movie put together that's as close to Blatty's vision apparently as we're going to get. And early reviews are saying watch it for the sake of saying you've watched it. However, the theatrical cut of the movie is far superior.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I can see that. But it'll be one of those things, I guess. I'm going to have to watch it just because I want to see extra stuff. I want to see how it would have been pieced together originally. But yes, I'll
Okay, so what should I do? Should I wait?
No. Watch the original. Watch the original.
Watch
No.
No, watch the theatrical, and then like we're probably going to do next week when it comes out. Watch the theatrical, but then source out the collector's edition with the director's cut, because a lot of the elements in the director's cut, it's the source is from VHS footage, so it's not even high definition. Like they sourced it from VHS, cleaned it up the best they could, and pieced it together that way. So it's they couldn't find any of the original film negatives. They don't exist anymore. I guess it was from a lot of work print VHS sources. So watch the theatrical, because everybody seems to be unanimous that have compared the two versions early. The theatrical is the far superior version. It's a leaner, tighter, more cohesive story. The director's cut, see it, for the sake of seeing it and some of the extra footage that could have been, but apparently it's not as good as we're led to believe. And it's funny, because that seems to be the trend lately. Because certainly growing up, you hear about all these movies, or you read about all these movies in Fangoria. I mean, I grew up reading Fangoria and reading all these articles, poring over all these articles, and there's so many things sometimes that you see, like behind the scenes, or you're reading this in an article in Fangoria and you see all these pictures, and then you see the movie come out, and it's like, well, where the hell was that scene? Like, I remember seeing this article with this picture, but I've never seen it in the movie. And you find out that it's, like all these different scenes that were, cut from the final release. And a perfect example, another recent example, I should say, is Nightbreed, the director's cut of Nightbreed. So, I love Nightbreed. Nightbreed is a fantastic movie. I watched it as a kid, grew up watching Nightbreed. I mean, I love Clive Barker. I love his visions. I love, the Hellraiser series. Nightbreed is a fantastic movie, a fantastic story. And I was excited to see, the director's cut. Supposedly that the footage only existed in work prints and VHS. Well, I mean, they ended up finding some film sources that they could convert and create a director's cut, or at least as close to a director's cut as possible with the footage that was found. And honestly, I was disappointed with the director's cut of Nightbreed. I enjoyed the theatrical version more, and I'm not sure if that's because that's the version I grew up watching. That's probably a big part of it. I just found that watching the director's cut, it almost had too much footage, and it took away from it.
And I agree, but it really seemed to me like the director's cut, or the Cabal cut. They also called it the Cabal cut, didn't they?
Yeah, there's some
many different names for it. But,
yeah, and I think the Cabal cut is actually another cut altogether, which has a lot of the VHS material that they chose not to use in Scream Factor's release of the director's cut. It's a little confusing. From some of the articles that I've read, the Cabal cut and the director's cut aren't exactly the same cut of the movie. The Cabal cut is still running longer. It's just the director's cut has better source material, but it doesn't have all the stuff that was thrown into the Cabal cut.
Yeah, and what it came down to was I found that there was just some of the scenes you could tell Wyatt never originally made the movie. Mm-hmm. Like, if I remember correctly, there was a scene with Boone's girlfriend in a red dress singing at like a lounge, but it was like an extended scene of her singing.
Yeah, and I don't think that scene was in the theatrical at all, from what I can remember.
No,
I don't think it was in there at all. And you know what? The ending of the director's cut of Nightbreed was the worst of all to me, because I loved the theatrical ending. I mean, David Cronenberg, huge David Cronenberg fan, huge fan, and have David Cronenberg in this movie. It was awesome. I mean, I loved his character. I mean, he was a psycho serial killer, and he wanted to become Nightbreed. I mean, he was after the Nightbreed. Now, secretly, I think he wanted to become them, but certainly in the movie, it's portrayed that he wanted to wipe them out. But I think secretly he wanted to become them. And maybe this is a topic, for another episode. But I guess what I'm getting at is the end of the movie, the end of the theatrical version. David Cronenberg's character came back to life.
Yeah.
And it showed him he was strung up, and all of a sudden, that jump scare moment. Because the priest who was injured, did the whole holy goo thing and brought the killer back to life, David Cronenberg's character. But in the director's cut version, it's totally different. I mean, it had this like romantic ending with Boone and his girlfriend and kissing, and I'm just like, what the hell is this? Like,
yeah, they were up on like the hillside or something like that.
Yeah, and you can see like the moon in the background. I'm like, am I even watching the same movie? Like, it
seemed way out of place.
Yeah, it completely took away from it. I thought the theatrical ending was way better. I thought it was.
Now, I have a question for you guys.
Yeah.
Do you guys think? Now, I think that this is like a trend that has been happening for a very long time. But do you think that when they release the theatrical version, already in mind that they're going to do a director's cut or an extended cut or, a super duper, you've never seen this in the theater before cut grab? Or do you actually feel that in some cases the director's cut is only being made to appease the integrity of what the director originally wanted to see? Because many movies I've seen the director's cut for and actually better than the theatrical.
Sorry, you cut out there for a second, Tim. Did you say it was better or was not better?
Was not better.
Agreed. 100%.
I have.
Look,
I cannot read.
There's some cases.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Right? Are we having mic problems again?
Yeah, you're.
Yeah, it sounded like you were dropping out.
I'll have to cut that and edit that.
I don't know what's going on. Am I fine now? Can you hear me now?
You're better now.
Yep, good now.
Okay.
Should I just keep going?
Yeah. So to your point, you want to know, okay. So what it really comes down to is, these cash grab type of director's cuts, are they really better? Well, what's the purpose? What's the point? Why are they putting so? I gotta admit, I cannot name a single director's cut version of a movie that I've seen that I can honestly say I like better than the original.
Yeah. Any genre at all?
Any genre at all.
Really? Well, I think the definitive director's cut of Blade Runner is better than the original. I think all the extended versions of Lord of the Rings is better than the original. But when you get into, that's only like two different movies. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. Like, why can't they just release the best version of their movie the first time?
I think it depends. There's several factors here. I think it depends on the movie itself, and I think it depends on the era when that movie came out. So I'm going to throw this one out here. My Bloody Valentine. We've talked about it in previous podcasts briefly. One of my favorite movies. Certainly, I've grown up watching My Bloody Valentine, and up until just a few years back, I've only ever seen the theatrical version of the movie, and that's the My Bloody Valentine extended edition. I mean, that was another grail, movie that we knew this footage existed. Nobody had ever seen it before. I mean, a few pictures here and there in magazines, but nobody ever knew if the footage, existed, to use in a movie. My Bloody Valentine, the extended edition, I think added to it because it didn't really extend very many scenes other than it just added some of the gore back in that was cut.
Yeah, but that's entirely different. Like, so let me be clear here. Director's cuts, and extended versions are two different things to me. Director's cuts are movies that are recut, scenes are changed, added scenes, entire scenes, all kinds of stuff. Extended cuts are versions where they elaborate on things, and it's, for the most part, I'll go back to your thought of Lord of the Rings here. The extended versions of the Lord of the Rings movies were released because they had to trim the movie down for release. So when they finally got the opportunity to put the movie out, well, here's the movie in its entire glory as it was originally meant to be seen. But they had that version originally in mind. Whereas a lot of the times when you're dealing with these director's cuts, it's, well, no, that just doesn't make any sense. Take that out. Or, no, we didn't really want to put that in there. So those versions never really existed. That was all just extra shit that they filmed at one point or another, possibly intended to put in the movie, and just felt maybe it didn't require to be in there. I find you're kind of talking about two different things.
Well, my 2 cents on the whole thing today, if a movie comes out, we should be getting what the original intended version of the movie is, whether it's the director's final cut or what the studios and the director have deemed the theatrical release. As far as I'm concerned, that's the release of the movie. If today I watch a movie and then 6 months later, a year later, I see another Blu-ray release of the director's cut of this movie, it's nothing but a cash grab. There's no excuse today, to have multiple versions of a single movie. 20 years ago, 30 years ago, it was a completely different thing, specifically when we're talking about horror, because with horror, I think what we're seeing is, whether it be a director's cut or an extended cut, however you want to slice it, it's typically, with a horror movie, it's because gore was cut out of it.
Yeah, you can't show
all those additional special effects that were created and shot at that time, it got hacked and slashed by the MPAA. But today, a perfect example is the Evil Dead reboot with Fede Alvarez. Fede Alvarez says the movie Evil Dead that you saw in theaters is my cut of the movie. Next week, we are getting an extended version of the Evil Dead with 5 minutes of extra gore that even Fede Alvarez says, I cut that out. Like that, to me, I tightened up the story. Like it was, it's cool to see it, but you know what? To me, that should have been a special feature on the Blu-ray. I own the Blu-ray for the Evil Dead remake. And you know what? As far as I'm concerned, all that 5 minutes of extra footage that we're going to see next week in digital form, that should have been an extra feature on the Blu-ray. This is nothing more than double dipping by the company, by the studios, and it pisses me off.
That's why I brought it up. That's why I brought it up, because it seems last little bit like it's like every movie is getting an extended cut, or you know what I mean, or a director's cut, or it's annoying. I only have so much money to buy the movies that I want to buy, and I don't. I don't know how many different titles I have in my collection multiple times because of a director's cut or an extended cut or whatever cut. Yeah, it's just.
Agreed.
The director's
but
girlfriend's
going back to something like My Bloody Valentine. My Bloody Valentine, I would gladly pick up because I know that the extended edition that we got, years later, released on Blu-ray, that was ultimately what the director had intended, but all those extra gore scenes and everything else, the special effects were cut out at the time by the MPAA, and it was released in a trimmed form, not by the director's wishes, but from the wishes of the MPAA. So I will gladly go out and buy that Blu-ray and see what his original intention was. And what's cool about that Blu-ray, I don't know if you have the Blu-ray or the DVD or if it plays the same, but I know the Blu-ray, Tim, it plays where you can actually watch the movie in its original theatrical form, or it gives you the option that you can play with all the parts included in the movie itself. So what they did was they it's not. I don't know if it's actually two versions of the movie on the disc or if it just kind of inserts them where they're supposed to go. But it's kind of cool the way they worked it.
Yeah, no, that does sound actually really cool.
Yeah, so I can watch it either way.
Yeah. So let's wrap up on Exorcist, guys. I don't think that we need to talk about The Beginning or Dominion unless you guys want to. But I got to tell you, I have no stomach to talk about those two movies. I, most of the time, forget that they exist, almost on purpose. Thoughts, Dave?
Selective memory?
Yeah, pretty much.
I think they're perfect examples of how studios love to throw away money.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I mean, you've got The Exorcist. Dominion, prequel to The Exorcist, which was shot, and then it was Dominion that was actually done first, and that was directed by Paul Schrader, and the studio was unhappy with how it turned out, and they ended up reusing, I think, not the entire same cast, but a lot of the same cast and a lot of the same sets and locations, and for the most part, the general story. So the story is the same in both, whether it's the Dominion prequel to The Exorcist or Exorcist the Beginning. It's the same story of a younger Father Merrin, originally played by Max von Sydow, this time around played by Stellan Skarsgård, about that exorcism that's talked about in previous movies. So it's that exorcism in North Africa, or in Africa, East Africa, that backstory with Father Merrin. So The Exorcist the Beginning came first. The studio was unhappy with it, with how it turned out. They then hired Rennie Harlin to basically reshoot the entire movie. So it's still the same general story, but it was basically reshot. I mean, I don't have any figures or how much money this cost or that they threw at the production, but I mean, they ended up releasing Exorcist the Beginning with a short theatrical run. Didn't make a whole lot of money. It flopped. Got released onto video, and then I can't remember what the time frame was, whether it was a year later, a couple years later, they ended up going, well, we have this whole other Exorcist movie. We might as well try to get some money from it. And they released it as Dominion, prequel to The Exorcist. So you've got basically the same story being told two different ways from two different directors that you can pick from and watch. The actual one that was released as the official, I guess we'll call it Exorcist 4, is Exorcist the Beginning. And then the alternative is Dominion, prequel to The Exorcist.
Yes. And with that, that's probably all I can stomach about those two movies right now. Tim, this is another... I don't even want to say this one's a gold star because these movies are just mediocre. They're shit mediocre, in my opinion. Heretic is a challenge, whereas these movies are just mediocre bullshit. So take it as you will. You probably might want to at least try to dip your toes in the water and watch them, or at least kind of sniff the flowers with them a little bit. But past that, I'm not even going to recommend anybody even indulges in that thought. Yeah.
Well, my original intent was to rewatch The Exorcist, the first one.
Yep.
Now I guess I'll jump right to Exorcist 3,
Yes.
and then I had plans on watching the TV series.
Yes.
Let's talk about the TV series.
Yeah, let's talk about the TV series. I still
Have you watched any additional episodes other than the first one, Adam?
No, I haven't had the chance.
Okay, and Tim, you haven't watched any yet.
I haven't. Yeah, no, I haven't started it.
Gotcha. So they're 4 episodes in right now.
Yeah. So we already
we'll save it for.
Yeah, we'll save it for another episode, I think, because we already kind of talked about how the show picks up in a previous episode, and it's pretty good.
We'll save it for another episode.
We'll save it for when we get a little bit deeper into it. So, with that, is there anything else to add to The Exorcist, guys? Anything else that you want to talk about? No?
Don't think so.
It was a really swell film.
Yeah,
it was a good talk.
Very swell, juicy Juicy. That's the word, right?
Juicy, he said the word.
He said the word. Ding, ding, ding. Right, exactly. So with that, everybody, we're going to actually probably wrap this up here in a second. But special announcements. We've talked about this on the Facebook page a little bit here, so we'll talk about it now as well. Next week, excuse me, next week we're going to have 2 episodes. Shock, awe, you say? Yes. Much like a lot of the people who are probably listening to this, or a lot of the people that we converse with on a regular basis, we don't have access to see, just due to life in general, we don't always have access to stay up late at night and watch The Walking Dead. I'm sorry. I've got kids. I've got to work early in the morning and a long commute every day. I can't wait till 11 o'clock at night and watch The Walking Dead. So what I do is, I got Exorcist on the line. What the frick? So what I tend to do is record it, watch it in a day or so. So the idea that we came up with was the first podcast that we're going to release next week, the day after the season 7 premiere, which concludes the amazing cliffhanger that we've seen at the end of season 6, which had everybody buzzing. We're going to do a running...
Pissed off everybody.
Oh, pissed off everybody's right. We're going to do a running commentary. So what we're going to do is the 3 of us on the Cast from the Coast are going to actually watch the episode together, and we're going to record a running audio commentary. Now, I know a lot of people might not, take to that, as much as, wanting to watch the episode while they're listening to us. But we're going to release it as a special episode, so that way, at the very least, you can watch the episode and come back and listen to what we had to say about what was going on during the different sets and the different portions of the episode. However, if you're brave enough, you can always listen to the audio cues. We're going to have it set up so that when you hear the bing, and I'm going to announce onto it, that you hit play on it if you have it pre-recorded as well, and you're going to be able to follow along with us and watch it as we are watching it as well. So put it on your iPod, put it on your Android, load it up on YouTube, whatever the case may be, and enjoy the first episode back with us, because this is a huge event for us, and we love The Walking Dead very much. With that as well, the actual second episode that week is going to be our next full episode of the Cast from the Coast. We're going to record the final episode in our lead up to Halloween, so our spooky month episode. David, what is our final episode going to be?
This one's going to be my favorite. So, the lead up to Halloween, we're going to do, of course, nothing less than Halloween and Halloween 2. So we're going to talk about Halloween, the night he came home, following that up with its sequel, Halloween 2. Why are we doing Halloween 1 and 2 together? Certainly because they both take place on the same night. Even though those movies were shot several years apart, it's, to me anyway, it's one cohesive story that chronicles the events of that one Halloween night. And you're probably thinking to yourself, wait a minute, I thought this was supposed to have some sort of novelization tie-in. You're right, it does. So even though these movies were not originally written as books, when the movies came out, there was a novelization tie-in that were written for most of the Halloween books. Certainly 1 and 2, which we are going to talk about. And there are novels for some of the additional ones, like Halloween 3, Season of the Witch, Halloween 4, but we'll talk about those next week. But there are some differences between the movies and the books. And we're going to highlight some of those differences next week, because if you can source out a copy of especially the original Halloween book, it's well worth a read. And I'm extremely excited next week to talk about that.
I agree. The original Halloween is probably one of my favorite novelizations of a movie. And that's what I say, is it's a novelization of the movie. Because, and what we're going to talk about this next week, the changes, the additions add so much to the story without changing the story. Just continuous insight and additions to it. And if you are any fan of the Michael Myers, scenario and movie series, it's almost an entirely new story. with these additions. It's
fantastic. We're going to talk about it next week. It's certainly if you're a fan, you're definitely going to want to tune in to next week's episode. So it's all going to be Halloween 1 and 2, and we're going to talk about those. And those two movies are easily number 1 and number 2 on my list.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie to you guys. I am really excited for next week's podcast because Mike Myers is my all-time. I pick him over Freddy, Jason, Leatherface. I love Mike Myers.
Yes, and you know what? Save those thoughts for next week because I have a lot of the same feelings and thoughts towards the situation, and I've got some tidbits and trivia for next week that have to do with John Carpenter and the whole Deborah Hill scenario with the original parts of the series. We'll get into those conversations, and I hope everybody tunes in with us. And with that, is there anything else that you guys want to add? Anything else you want to say?
Nope, I'm good.
Yeah. Tim?
No, I'm good too. I'm really excited for next week. I'm not going to lie.
Oh, yeah. Totally excited for next week. Excellent. So, once again, thank you from everybody from the cast from the coast. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We look forward to hearing from anybody on Facebook. Send us messages if you want to talk about anything. Let us know what you think of the podcast. We love the feedback. We'd love to hear from people. As well, a little bit of an addition to next week, getting in ready mode, so to speak, for the next real episode that we're going to be producing, which is the kind of the play-along episode of the season premiere of The Walking Dead. We have a poll on the Facebook page. We want to know from you who's going to meet Lucille head on. Sorry, bad pun. But we want to know from you guys who you really think. Yeah, I was waiting for that. We want to know from you guys who you really, truly believe is going to get to meet Lucille. We're going to talk about that as well next week. So when the polls come together and we're getting ready to watch the episode, we're probably going to take a couple of minutes before the episode and we're actually going to talk about our thoughts about what's going to happen, and then we'll watch it. So please stay tuned. Tune in next week. Thank you, everybody. And from everybody here at Big House from the Coast, have a good night.
Good night.
Goodbye, everybody.